Beauty, thank you. Okay. Video games. Look, the video gaming world is a fascinating world to me. Ever since the origins of the first prototypes in the 1950s through to Space War in 1961, the rise of the golden age of the arcade era in the 70s, Pac-Man, Space Invaders through to the 80s, and the home console, Sega, Atari, Nintendo, right through the early fighting games of the 90s, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, through to Xbox, PlayStation, esports in the early 2000s, right up to the modern day, and the high resolution, high definition, high detail games, VR and HR games that we AR games that we have today. The gaming world is something that playing video games is something that lots and lots of people like to do. It's interesting. It's stimulating. Look, it's a way to escape into fantasy. It's structured gameplay, leisurely competition. But above all, it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's something that we like to do. We do it because it's fun and it's enjoyable. And really, when you have a think about it, the technology is immersive and it's just everywhere. You know, I don't think there would be a modern computer or a laptop or mobile phone that's not developed these days that doesn't have a portion of its capability devoted to having gameplay on its platform. So the technology is everywhere. We love to do it. The industry is enormous as well. You know, in 2023, it was worth over $221 billion US, which when combined with the music and film industry, the Hollywood music and film industry, it outweighs that Hollywood and film and music combined. So it's an enormous industry, but it is not somewhere where it is always fun to play. The gaming world is not a neutral environment. It's a place where politics happen, and it's a place where not everybody always cooperates and plays nicely. It's a place where ideologies compete for the influence and attention of the audiences. And in my opinion, I really think that the video gaming world is the most underestimated and overlooked communications medium, and really should be considered right alongside social media platforms as a major communication and human engagement arena in the digital age. Let's have a look at the demographics. So, look, the demographics have changed a lot since the early days. Really, the stereotype of the teenage boy playing video games in his darkened bedroom is a stereotype that came with games in the early days. But the reality is, look, it hasn't been like that for decades and decades. That stereotype really probably came out mostly the early game developers were of that. A lot of them were of that demographics. Early tech adopters and early game developers were young white males, and so the way the gaming world unfolded in the early days, the game developers would develop games that they liked to play themselves, and so as time went on, those games were marketed to the same demographic, and then when the home console came in, rather than marketing one home console where a family could play, if you marketed a one player, one console, it spelt more money. And so that's really the big marketing push in the 70s and 80s came, and it reinforced that demographic. But as I said, it hasn't been like that for decades. And this day and age, the majority of gamers average 35 years of age, and really the US, Asia, and most of the communities around the world, almost just under half of video game players are female as well. And 80 over 80% of internet users, so that's about 3.5 billion people, so 40% of the world's population play video games of one sort or another. So why do we enjoy playing games? Well, look, a lot of games these days are developed with self-determination theory in mind. It's one of the foundational pillars of what makes a game enjoyable and what makes us play a game for a longer period of time. So, self-determination theory dictates that we will play games for a longer period of time and we'll enjoy them more if there is autonomy. In other words, if we're given choices within the games to decide what we do. There's competence, so we have the ability to learn a skill, master a skill, and control the outcome. And there's relatedness, so how that means how connected and how much we feel that we belong within the storyline, and we can relate to the storyline within the game. And so, a lot of games these days will use self-determination theory as the foundational pillar of how their games are developed, because we will play them longer and enjoy them more. And it comes through in the games with in-depth, detailed storylines, consequences for your actions in the games. If you do something wrong, you'll lose points, or you'll die, or there'll be consequences. And there's a character payoff. So if you succeed, the opposite, there will be rewards at the end. And what it does, it tends to just to promote a sense of being invested. And so we'll value our in-game identity sometimes just as much as we do our personal identity outside of a game. And when our friends are involved too, it is also lends itself to being a more enjoyable environment and something we're more likely to be involved in for longer. Let's have a look at the community. So look, the gaming community is broad, it is diverse, it is huge, and it crosses all boundaries. And really, when we're talking about the gaming community and gaming subgroups within the broader community, it's all about people coming together, like-minded people coming together to share a common interest, and it's their love and enjoyment of playing video games. So they'll come together to do that. And it's not just about our local physical environment. The gaming community crosses boundaries, cultures, all sorts of ages. You can develop long-term relationships. It's a place where we exchange our news and inform on different things, pass on information. And it's not just the community and our fellow players that we interact with, but it's also the game developers. We can now in this digital age, we have the opportunity to have some sort of relationships, provide feedback, give ideas, discuss problems in forums, and communicate back to the game developers themselves. And sometimes this will lend itself to things like parasocial relationships with things, which are relationships that most of us have in one way or another. So a parasocial relationship is really a one-way relationship. So it's essentially where the type of relationship we'll have with celebrities or sportsmen or politicians or influencers, where we can feel that we have a connection and a relationship with someone, but essentially it's one way. You might get the odd reply back. If you reply to a celebrity on Twitter, sometimes you'll get a reply back, but it's really about the relationship being one way, but we feel connected to that person. Okay, so while the gaming community is enormous and boundaryless, the representation of the characters within the games, it's also changed over the years, the same as the demographics have evolved. And in terms of character diversity, still a long way to go, but it has changed considerably, especially since the early days of the gaming games that were developed. However, having said that, still the majority of the main characters within games still tend to be male. The white characters often tend towards showing physical prowess and abilities and are violent, whereas the black characters still, there's a tendency to be more one-dimensional. The female characters, that they are increasing in numbers, but there's a tendency for them to be on the side of being submissive, sexualized still, and having a lower narrative importance than the male characters. And those with marginalized identity still, while there are some exceptions, still there's a tendency for their characters to play a secondary role within the games. However, it is changing, and I'll show you a few examples in a minute, but the changes that are coming through, we're giving more compelling storylines and showcasing unique abilities and having a stronger representation, more impact on the different characters than just the male characters, which traditionally have been more prominent and had more dominance. So here's some examples. You don't have to read through all of these, but these are just some to give you a sort of a sense of our different community members and how the representation of the characters in the games is becoming more reflective of our community itself. And so you've got different neurodiverse characters, Symmetra and Cassandra, in Rage of the Dragons, different non-binary characters as well. There is now, look, a wide variety of female characters who are showing they're not just tokenistic, but they're ambitious, they're flexible, they're powerful, they're smart, they're adaptive. You know, the most famous one of all, probably Lara Croft, going back to the days of Lara Croft, is still there, but there are many others. Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn and Commander Shepard from Mass Effect are a couple of examples. Differently abled people, so Joy in Fortnite has vitiligo. And some Xbox avatars now have been coming through where the avatars are in wheelchairs or have prosthetics or in some cases are pregnant as well. So just to sort of represent the different diverse nature of our community, you're seeing that in the avatars too. And of course, there's a wide variety of characters these days representing people of colour or Asian. Okay, the food. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed this or not, but partaking in high calorie, low nutrition, sugar dense, unhealthy cuisine, in other words, eating junk food, is considered somewhat appropriate in a gaming session. Why is that so? All right. Well, look, there's several reasons for it. And really, it has to do with the way games have evolved and the way the environment is structured, the way the gaming environment exists, and the situation that you're in when you're actually getting into a session. So, you know, the research has been done on, and it's due to a number of factors. So the economy, you don't have a lot of time. If you're up to your eyeballs in an 8-hour session, you don't have time to go and spend time preparing food. So when you haven't got a lot of time, you've got minimal time to work with. It's convenient and it's efficient. So you need something quickly. You don't have time. It's a type of community sense of belonging where you're consuming the food together. It's a tradition. It's the way it has been since the beginning, and so it continues on. And really, when you're in a gaming session, it's the time. It's almost like a little bit of a party. It's relaxation. It's leisure time. So it's the time to have a little bit of party food or indulge in things that you enjoy. You're doing an activity you enjoy. So why not have some food that you enjoy too? And they're the main reasons. However, it's not the time for a big salad when you're gaming. Let's put it that way. However, we should also say that this does not mean that we as gamers, that's all we eat, because we don't. So we have certain times where we'll sit down for a family meal or with our partners, and we'll have a prepared meal, healthy options, and at a sit down time, like everyone else. But it just means when we're gaming, it's a time to indulge a little bit, and sometimes we will skip a meal as well. So that can happen too. All right. Generally, you'll hear different things about, in some ways, the negative aspects that can be associated with, or the negative effects that can be associated with long-term gaming. But there's also a wide variety of things that are good for us. So a lot of the research is showing that, gaming will increase our attention to detail, our self-confidence, hand-eye coordination, helps with problem solving. Sometimes it causes stress, but other times it's a stress coping mechanism to relax while we're playing. It can improve your memory, curiosity, learning, decision-making, pro-social cooperation. It also can help with our abilities to multitask. Right, immersion and flow. These are probably the two ideal states, and gamers will know what these are. But these are the ideal states we look for and that we hopefully can achieve when we are gaming. So immersion is when you actually have a sense of you're stepping into the game. You're in a realistic, believable world with realistic graphics. You forget that technology is involved. You forget that you're dealing with technology, that you're on a console in front of a computer. You start to think like the character within the game. And the way that this can come through and be represented is when you have the angles on the game can rotate around, so you can see sort of 360 or 180 degrees. So you get a wide rotating view of the screen. The graphics are high resolution, very detailed, realistic graphics that show depth, color, lighting. The sound effects are realistic. And in a game like, let's say, Red Dead Redemption, probably is an example. When you have side storylines that have no real effect on the actual the main storyline, but they're just a little side storyline. If you're patting the horse's mane, it's very realistic, or you're feeding a dog. It depends what sort of food's in the plate that you give the dog. So these sort of smaller touches, or an animal runs through the field, we can hear the sound of the wind. These are the types of effects that can create a sense of immersion within a game. The flow state is when you actually feel like you are in the game itself. And this will manifest itself when you have that sense that time stands still. So when you've just pumped out a really quick 5-hour session and you jump away to make yourself a cup of coffee or something like that, or grab something to eat, and you don't realize that you've been playing the game for 5 hours, it feels like, maybe you've been there for 1 hour. So the time is just flowing by. That's when you're in the flow state. That's the sensation you'll get. And it's sort of it'll come through when you're making automatic responses and you feel a sense of happiness and joy and satisfaction. And it comes about when the game is not too easy, not too hard. And that's when you can enter into the flow state. Persuasion influence. So the gaming scholar Ian Bogost put forward the theory of procedural rhetoric. Now, procedural rhetoric is essentially the ability of games to make arguments through rules and procedures. So it's not using graphics or information or pictures, it's through rules and procedures. Now, procedural rhetoric exists on a continuum where you have two main types of situations where the game is designed and the designer puts in place the rules. So the designer sets the rules of the game and creates the possibility spaces that the user can explore through play. And that, in other words, the rules of the game dictate how we can be persuaded and influenced to behave in a certain way. And an example of that might be one of the older games, Overcooked 2, where you have to prepare to be successful. You have to prepare meals in a kitchen. Now, to do that, to prepare the meals, you need to show teamwork. You need to prepare the meals accurately, efficiently. You need to move around, be well coordinated, engage with other team members without making mistakes, just like you're in a real kitchen. They're the rules of the game. So in other words, to be successful, you've got to adhere to those rules. And so the theory puts forward that you can promote those different characteristics and persuade people to behave and influence them to behave in a certain way based on the rules of playing a game. The other aspect of procedural rhetoric is where the players design and interpret the game. So these are those games where you as a player are given a choice. And depending on what choices you make within the game, you might be playing it in aggressive mode or stealth mode, the game will unfold and you'll follow different storylines depending on the decisions you make within the game. Now, The Last Guardian is an example of that, where if you engage with the beast, you've got to escape from the Forbidden Land. You've got tests and certain tasks you've got to do. If you engage with the beast, develop rapport, feed the beast, develop a relationship, show kindness and compassion and look after them and support them, the beast will unlock certain abilities and assist you get through the tasks and be more successful in the game. If you don't show those behaviors to the beast, then you don't get as many abilities within the game. In-game purchases. So this is the bane of many people's existence. So the monetization and microtransactions that happen in modern games today is when it was probably popularized, wasn't the first, but popularized probably by Fortnite. Most people will have heard of Fortnite. So that's when a game is free. Rather than paying $100 for a game, the game itself is free. But the developers and the platforms get their money back through a series of microtransactions that are monetized within the game. So in other words, when something is free, it creates a psychological sense of no risk. So you're not really losing anything. So it's attractive to start playing the game because it doesn't cost you anything. And then you'll then make several purchases within the game of a small amount of money, but they're purchases that you have to do. And so, in effect, what it does, it creates a separation of the pain of spending money. So when you buy something, something within a game, you make the purchase. That creates a psychological sense of discomfort because you're spending money. But then there's a gap between spending the money and when you're actually using the things that you purchase. So an example might be if you're in a game and an item costs 700, costs you to buy 700 berries, costs you $5. It's only a very small amount of money, so you still got to spend the $5, but you do it. Then you've got your 700 berries, and you can use those when you want. One of the techniques that these microtransactions will use, though, is an item might cost 700 berries. You can only buy the berries in 600 lots. So you spend your $5, but you've got to buy another 100 berries, but the game doesn't offer 100 berries. You only can buy them in 600 lots. So you've got to spend another $5, get another 600 berries, and then you've got 1,200. Spend your 700 to get your item, and you've still got 500 berries left over. Now, psychological, that will seem like a waste just to leave it. And so you're stuck in the same predicament where you're 100 berries short of another item. And so the game lures you into spending and repeating the cycle again. In other words, you're lured into the cycle of spending, making lots of small microtransactions on a game that costs you nothing, but over time, these transactions start to add up. And it feels wasteful to leave it, so you end up just repeating. Addiction. So this is something that you'll hear a lot. So addiction, whether games are addictive or not. So the American Psychiatric Association has named gaming addiction, has listed it, and the World Health Organization has also listed gaming disorder as an official disorder. One of the problems that comes with addiction has been loot boxes. So you don't see them as much anymore as you used to, but loot boxes were using very similar techniques to poker machines. And so where there was excitement, there was a hit and miss, you didn't know what you were going to get. They were available for a limited time. There was the potential for a reward. It was all about chance. It was seen as a precursor to gambling, a gateway into gambling. And so loot boxes aren't something that you see so much anymore. They've kind of, in many ways, been replaced by another technique, which is the battle pass. So you'll see this in different games, and that's where you'll need to buy the battle pass. If you don't buy it, you're heavily restricted. There's different reward tiers. You don't get as many cosmetic options. You can't get the cool skins without buying the battle pass. You can't customize your weapons and all these types of things. The battle passes can be available for a limited time, and you can't accelerate through the game. So in other words, you'll be left behind. You don't have to buy a battle pass, but if you don't buy it, you're not going to get through, and you're not going to keep up with everyone else. One of the other aspects that is an enticement in games is the crossover of characters. So you're seeing it now with different characters from movies and franchises crossing over into different universes, and it can be very appealing and attract us to playing the games that have crossover characters. Toxicity. So what am I talking about? Anyone know? So this is I've got a 18-year-old son, and what can turn him from a normal, kind, helpful, cooperative, well-balanced young man into a screaming, aggressive lunatic? Who knows? But it can happen. And so, look, toxicity is something that does happen when we're playing video games, and it's really down to a couple of factors. It's the sense of anonymity. So when we're not who we are, when we're dealing with someone in real life, it's different when we're anonymous on a game. The group norms can be pushed too. So when you're in a group situation, the group norms can be pushed, and we start to adhere to the new bar. So the bar gets raised or lowered, and we start to adhere to the new group norms. And we can also take on it and start to behave the way we think our avatar should behave. So, in other words, if your avatar is a nurse, or you might take on the the behavioural feelings and characteristics of the way a nurse would behave. compared to if you're a clan member, it might be something entirely different. So these are all combined to create a sense of toxicity that can appear. And the other thing to remember is that in the gaming world, it can be quite stressful too. So it's our emotions are running high, it's competitive, so that also feeds in the toxicity. One of the ways to counter it really is to play with friends. So not play with people who create a sense of toxicity. You can put up some of the platforms that research has shown you put up behavioural cues about playing more cooperative and nicely and not being as aggressive can help when friends play together. And you can also make the decisions on what could cause angst at the beginning of the game. So in other words, settle on the characters, the avatars that you want right at the beginning in the foyer rather than having problems down the track. And that can also set the stage for more enjoyable experiences. And if all else fails, you can mute. That seems to work too. A lot will be said about violence in games, and the concerns are, you'll hear it, is that it encourages and normalises violence, aggressive thoughts and moods, these types of things. And while there is a correlation between aggressive players will play aggressive games, and there is some evidence to say that thinking that it could violent games could be a possible precursor to more aggressive behaviour. All the testing that has been done has said that there is insignificant scientific evidence that there is a causal link between violent video games and violent behaviour. So in other words, violent video games do not cause a person to be violent. If you have violent tendencies or you will play games like other people do, but it doesn't turn a normal person into a violent person. The research is showing no causal link. And the studies are ongoing, but the thing to remember is that games are not gamers. Okay, a couple of examples here of some bit of disinformation where games. This one's from the AC-130 Gunship Simulator, where it's appeared in the mainstream media. It's the screenshot from the game on the left, and the news story using a screenshot from a video game that purports to be a real-life activity. In this case, it was from 2017, and it was published by the Russian military defense to claim that there was evidence the US and the Islamic State were cooperating together. And it's a screenshot from a highly realistic video game. Here's another example. So Arma 3, probably one we've heard of. So this is, again, a very highly realistic graphics. And this is used, there's many examples where Arma 3 has been used in the gaming, in mainstream media. Spanish, Indian, Argentinian TV picked this up. So very recently, so in the current Russian-Ukraine war, a short video clip. It was actually this one where the screenshots are, but it was grained up a bit and made it a little bit fuzzy. It was actually published in mainstream media as purportedly showing that a NATO convoy was destroyed by the Russian army, when in fact it was just highly realistic graphics from Arma 3. Reframing reality. So one of the areas where authoritarian states, governments, foreign intelligence services, all the bad actors, big tech platforms, will use these highly realistic images in video games to reframe, recreate history, distort historical events. And they'll use it to support extremist narratives or conspiracy theories. And it's about bringing distorted graphics from the gaming world into the real life to promote different narratives. Social propaganda is one more as well. So this is, and it's not just limited to the authoritarian states. This is where games are so realistic, the mods and aesthetics, and it's recreating real life battle zones, ones that are unfolding now, but distorting the reality of what's actually happening in real life to shape storylines and narratives and create the impression that the real life events are unfolding in a different way. And look, there's different examples. Russia's doing it. They're coming from different sides. China famously did one around the Hong Kong protests for independence, where they create a game where the idea is to subdue the protesters. That's the idea of the game. But it's not just limited to China. America's Army also for 20 years used a video game as a recruitment tool to shape the world how the US saw different conflict zones and the role of the US military around the world to recruit people for the military. Psychographic targeting. So, look, this is also a lot of information can be collected through our values, our opinions, our personality, our interests, just through everything that we do on a game. So, it's how we interact, how the comments that we make, how we play the games. Our metadata can all be collected and collected by actors for things like advertising, cyber attack, cyber crime. All our personal data is available there when we're playing. So, it's something to be cautious of. And finally, the future. So where do I see the future? So look, more research really is needed into the influence of the gaming world and how it can influence us. More research into the problem behaviours, gambling, radicalisation, how education, gamification can improve our skills and improve our education through gaming situations. What is ahead? Look, I just see more highly realistic, immersive virtual reality games, highly interactive, real world simulations, and of course the metaverse is coming too. So very soon, I think the whole world are going to be gamers. Thank you very much.
How can you have a problem with chicken nuggets and Doritos and all those kind of things?
I love chicken nuggets.
You and I aren't friends anymore. That was an awesome sort of scientific, I would say, look at gaming. There was an interesting comment, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's probably quite relevant. So World of Tanks and War Thunder, and how they keep getting people who are like so embedded in the game and they want to update the models in the game to be accurate. They keep leaking the classified information about the systems.
Wow. Yeah. That's a whole nother scenario, isn't it?
It's like they're so invested in the game, they want to make sure the game actually looks like real life. It's pretty intense in those spaces.
Yeah, I actually think it's where we're going. It's the games are just increasingly becoming more realistic, and more immersive, closer to real life. That I think that's the direction it's going. So it's very interesting that they're doing that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Steve. That was
pleasure.
a great talk. And
thanks, Gina. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for having me.
There'll be some discussion. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.